Hello, Ms. Gonzalez. Thank you for coming in today and showing interest in Leanne's work. Before we start, I want to assure you that this test is just a screenshot of how Leanne's doing. It's not a complete reference into how she's doing in school. But because of this, I want to bring you and show you in her portfolio so you can look at her work that she's doing in class as well.
Thank you for setting up this meeting with me. I look forward to hearing about how she's doing it in school and how well she did on this test.
Yeah. So this test right here, if you look at it over, was taken back in March. And what this test is, it's a U.S. test of achievement. As an achievement test, it's a snapshot, like I said earlier, of what the students have already learned. Mm-hmm. The section at this very top right here is called the demographics section. And with this, it makes sure that we have the correct student and that we also have the same district and that the school is also correct as long as with their grade level. And then right here we have a student ID, which basically it just helps us keep our students' test scores confidential, and so that no one's seeing what exactly they got. Mm-hmm. Only those that have information about the student's ID number is correct. So if you want to just look over and make sure it's Leanne's test, that everything's correct.
Okay, good.
Okay, so now that we've gone over the demographics, we're just going to go ahead and look over at the way the test is actually broken into. So this top section is called the norm reference, and this is what right here at the bottom is called the criterion reference.
So what is the difference between norm reference and criterion reference?
That's a great question. So the norm reference is whenever we take students are compared to another set of students that is broken up into students of across the nation that have already taken the test. And then this criterion reference is broken down into specific skills that is actually the students should already know.
So that's what the norm group is?
Right. So the norm group, like I said earlier, is a group of students across the nation who have already taken the test prior to it being released. So do you have any questions over what we've gone over so far?
So how many students were involved in that norm group?
Okay, so the norm group for this particular test, let me see here. It looks like there was a total of 10,000 students. This is a pretty good estimate of how we can compare our students because it's such a large group of students. We're able to see exactly a more accurate number.
That really is a lot of students. How did Leanne do compared to students who already took the test?
Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the norm reference scores. So if you look over here, before we look at the actual numbers, I want to go ahead and explain to you that the norm reference section is already broken up into. So we have lots of different little tests that they're called subtests that breaks up the test in general. So at the very top of this portion, you can see how we have subtests, number of items, raw score, national percentiles, scale score, and then we also have these percentile bands. So if you look over to, I wanted to show you this specifically because it kind of gives you an idea overall on the whole portion of the norm reference. So this is called basic battery, which basically refers to subjects like math, reading, and writing specifically. And whereas the complete battery is more of a composite total of including those basic battery subjects as well as social studies and science. So if you take a look at the top levels, like I said earlier, the number of items is just the amount of questions that were already on the test. The raw score is referring to how many answers Leanne got correct. So if you want to look over the subtests and see if there's any particular subtests you need me to go further in detail about or if you have a question about.
What is the subtest procedures referring to in the math section? Right.
Okay, so this particular section refers to how students use different strategies to solve a problem. For example, when you're looking for the perimeter and solving for that, are the students able to measure out the sides of the length? Are they able to measure the length, the width, and then use that particular what do you call it?
The measurements?
Yes, the measurements, I'm sorry. The measurements in order to a equation to solve for the perimeter.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Okay, so if you want to go ahead and look at the other subtitles and see if you have any other sections.
I don't think so, but can you explain to me why Leanne got a 44 on procedures?
Okay, so this isn't referring to exactly her score. That's not saying necessarily that she failed because it's not a percentage like how we think in school, 100% is passing. Yes. So 44 right here, this is just saying that Leanne is in the 44 percentile. So if we look over to the bell curve that I have for you, and you will be able to take this home with you. So if we look over, she's going to be falling into the 44% right here, the percentile, I'm sorry, not percent. And that's basically falling into this green section where this is the average range of students. So she's falling into the average range of what students have scored on this particular section and procedures. So there's also this band of error right here, which is basically also a student error of measurement. So if we look over to the 44%, it looks like she's already here within the 45, it looks like, and close to the 49. So basically, this is just in case if there's a error in the students or on the test even, because sometimes the tests are not always correct. So this is like a plus or minus 4, which accounts for the score that Leanne may have already gotten. So it's just making sure, like, if there's anything wrong with the student might have had a bad day that day, or the test doesn't necessarily give the right answer, it was a better answer that was incorrect. It's just taking account for those errors. So do you have any questions in regard to that so far?
What is this last section scaled scores referring to?
Okay, so that's a great question. So the scaled score is another way that we are able to see how our students are doing compared to those other students who already took the test. So if you look over to the bell chart again, the scale is used to convert the raw scores into a common scale. And we're going to look over here where it says the USTA scores, and this scale is broken up to from 200 to 800. So if we look over back to the procedures area that you were talking about earlier, it says that she was at a 488. So if we go to 488 right here, it's showing us that she's just below that little midpoint of average, but she's still within the average, so I'm pretty satisfied with where she's at. So do you have any other questions?
So from what I've understood, Leanne still needs help catching up to that average. What can we do to help her get there?
That's a great place to go ahead and move on to the second portion, because it'll give us more an idea of what specific skill it might be. So this is, like I said earlier, the criterion reference section, and basically this gives us some more of an idea of what certain sections she may need help on, like a specific skill. So can you look over the list of skills right here, just like the earlier, the subtest, of what you think you may not understand?
So can you explain to me what number facts are?
Okay, so number of facts are basic addition, subtraction, or multiplication, division calculations that the student should be able to do just by thinking without having to write them down. So as you can see in this particular section, all of the top little sections at the top are already labeled for you. So RS stands for raw score, and so this is basically how many answers that Leanne got correct. This number possible is however many questions were actually on the test. Then we also have a low, medium, and high. So low refers to an area that the student may need more help on. Medium is basically the average amount of where the students have been expected to already been able to do. And this high is whenever we see a student who's clearly getting a really good idea of what that specific skill is over. Do you have any other questions on another section?
So Leanne needs more help on those number facts. What can we do at home to help her get there?
That's great. So I actually have some board games that I can give to her tomorrow, and they'll basically just help her in a way of making number facts fun for her and just make it more interactive with her. So how does that sound to you?
Great. We play a lot of board games at home, so I'm sure she'll love that.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So I also have been aware that I want you to see that just because she got a low area in that section doesn't mean necessarily that she didn't do well in that skill. It might also be because if you look here, there's only 12 questions and she answered 8 of them correctly. So she's very close. So it could have been just the answer was confusing to her, or maybe she really just needed help. So if that is the issue, then I think these games will be able to help her a lot better. But I also had a question for you. I don't know if you could answer it for me. But I noticed that in capitalization, punctuation, usage, and sentence structure, she scored very high in those sections, and I'm very proud of her. If you look over to her portfolio that I have here, if you see on all the writing assignments that I have for her, she scored very high, and I would have to tell you that a lot of my students at her age are struggling a lot with their writing. They don't like to write, or they're just not sure how to get their ideas on paper. So do you work with her at home on her writing skills?
Yeah, we actually read a lot and we write, and so we work with that. She wants to be a writer, so I think that's a good sign, like that she's doing well in that.
Definitely. I think that's wonderful that she wants to be a writer. I think she'll be a great writer one day. Do you have any other questions on any sections? I know this is a lot of information and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So I have here a reference sheet that you can use and another terminology sheet that you can take along with you, and also the bell curve so you can measure up and see how she's doing in other sections. But feel free to call me, email me. I'm available almost at any time. I'm pretty good about getting back to you as soon as possible. But I think Leanne is making great progress in all of them, all of the sections actually. I will keep up with her in class, kind of separate her when I can to work on specific skills with her. But I do want to thank you for coming in and taking the time to meet with me.
Well, thank you for the meeting with me and explaining all this, because yes, it is a lot of information, but I think this definitely helps. So I look forward to being able to work through this myself and use it in the future. But I'm ready to get going, so thank you.
Thank you so much.